I know. I'm so sorry. I've missed some of these, but
Yeah, no worries.
it's been a little crazy as of late. So it's all
Well,
good.
yeah, and that happens. And there's nothing wrong with
It
that.
does. It does.
I'm familiar with a little crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
As always, I'm going to give us till 12:01 to see who all joins. But while we're waiting, I'll pull my slides up. Okay. For people in the lobby. Share my screen. Hey, Emily, how are you?
Very good.
This is where my computer slows down while I'm trying to share. There we go. Okay. And we'll just give it another minute. Hey, Lynn, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Enjoying the nice weather we're having.
We are having nice weather here in the Chicago area too. It's, of course, I can only kind of see it by looking out my window. I've yet been able to get away from my computer, but that's the way these things go sometimes. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Wonderful. Yes. All right, so we will get started. This session, as always, is recorded and transcribed, and we like to use clips from the session in our LinkedIn posts. Always looking for ways to provide value, and you guys are going to say things that result in value, so appreciate that. We like to see your face, and so if you can turn your camera on, that helps because this is interactive, and being able to see you while we're talking is valuable to us as hosts. You can use the chat if you would like as a way to say something about what you're doing, where you're at, or to ask questions during the conversation. And I would just say if you haven't been on CI Mastermind Live before, it'd be great if you'd put something about yourself in there, because usually about half of the folks on this call have talked with each other before. The program is 45 minutes, and I'm going to do a brief intro, and then I'm going to hand it over to our guest, Ken Place. Wave your hand so everyone knows who you are, Ken. There he is. And he's going to go through our topic for the day. So this program that you're part of is small group facilitated sessions. Usually we're trying to solve a problem. It kind of depends on the kind of feedback that we get from the questions that you answered in our registration. But usually we're trying to solve a problem or expose some problems that we can talk through as a group. Putting this many CI-minded people on a single call is very powerful. So we're trying to extract and use that power to make your jobs better, just like what we try and do in continuous improvement in general. So that's the idea, and I will facilitate that discussion. As always, I ask you to respect each other on the call, and I also encourage you not to share things that shouldn't be made public. If we get into something deep in terms of problem solving, you may want to be a little careful about what you share, and help each other. Please speak up. We like active participants. All right, I've been talking about leader standard work quite a bit on our previous sessions. I'll continue talking about it because it's gained a lot of traction, and we've had a lot of really positive feedback on leader standard work. And if you don't know, my firm, Chalmers Street Consulting, does all sorts of continuous improvement support of usually mid-market companies, manufacturers, and service providers. And leader standard work is one of those things that we do because we're always looking at how we can use our understanding of management practices, procedures, and technologies to streamline and improve our clients' processes. Leader standard work in particular, we find very powerful because it's one thing to go and implement a new process or to change the way roles are structured. It's another thing to make sure that it actually sticks and stays in place. And maybe most importantly is we often find leaders don't have their own standard. They're trying to get their employees to follow a standard procedure, but their actions on a day-to-day basis are pushed or pulled by the external environment, by the whirlwind of daily operations. And that's not what we want because it means that we don't get time for continuous improvement. So we've been deploying leader standard work with our clients for now a couple years. And last year we implemented a software tool to help with that process. And what we found is really important in leader standard work is it's both an artifact and a discussion. And the discussion is where a ton of the value comes. Frankly, it often exposes deficiency in some of the things that leaders do, some of their behaviors. And if facilitated well, which is what we do, that deficiency can be resolved or mitigated in some way. And so we found that it's very powerful for helping level up the game of the leaders. In fact, one of our clients called it gamification of the business of leadership, which I thought was kind of cool. And so anyways, we focus on both the template and the cadence. And we use a dashboard to drive discussion to see how well the team is following that leader standard work. I'm going to be putting some testimonials out there probably in the next few weeks. And I was kind of thinking we have our client gave us a lot of material. And so I kind of wanted to A/B test it with this group. So you're going to see an email from me with a couple different versions of our testimonial. And I want to hear which ones really speak to you. Like, what are the ones that are like, yeah, that's something that really helps me see how this fixes a problem for us. So anyways, pay attention, look out for that. And as always, if you know of someone that could use this, we are very happy to help with the deployment and show you our method for deploying leader standard work. All right. So next month, we will be talking about efficient meetings and quick issue resolution with Dan Wallace. As continuous improvement people, we drive a lot of meetings, sometimes maybe too many meetings. Meeting effectiveness, meeting efficiency is something I pay close attention to because I know I'm pulling my clients into discussions and I need to make the best use of their time. So I've asked Dan. Dan is a entrepreneurial operating system implementer. He's been doing it for years. He's really good at it. I've used some of his practices with my clients, and I've asked him to come and share some of those practices to ensure meeting efficiency with all of you. An additional note on this session is it's going to be a CI Mastermind live, LinkedIn live session. So we'll run the session as we usually do. Actually, you'll get a little bit different link than you usually do because we won't use Teams. We're going to use something called StreamYard. But we'll have folks from LinkedIn able to jump in and just kind of hear our conversation live. So it's a little different. We're going to try it out. We may do it a few times a year. We're not really sure, but it's a way to get some broader reach out there and give people the opportunity to hear these conversations and get some value from those. All right, I've talked way too much, and I need to hand over to Ken Place. Ken is going to talk to us about quality systems and using your quality systems. Ken, if you can do like a like a little introduction on yourself, give people a little bit of content as well, and then we'll jump into questions.
Sure. Thank you very much, Matt, and thanks for the opportunity to address this group. Can I confirm, are you guys seeing my screen here?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So I'll give you the cliff notes on this and kind of the why I'm here and talking to this group. I started my career in the automotive space as a tier 1 supplier to the big 3 and a lot of aftermarket and ag companies making engine components. And that's where I first got my exposure to quality, and at a very early point in my career kind of fell in love with it and haven't left since. So I've been doing this quality related activities for a long time. Spent 15 years with that company, and then 12 years after that in a consulting role with the University of Illinois. And so I did a lot of Six Sigma, a lot of Lean, a lot of training and consulting on pretty much anything quality. In 2018, when it came time for me to decide to go out on my own and what am I going to do on my own, I had a lot of experience with continual improvement, and I gave some thought to hanging my own shingle and saying I'm going to work on projects and process improvement. But my experience to that point in the consulting area had led me to understand that there were a lot of companies out there that were doing process improvement, but did not have very good systems foundationally in their company to tie the improvements back to. And so when I did decide to go out on my own, I wanted to focus on providing those foundations to companies and establishing those systems, and more so ISO systems. So I work with companies now on ISO systems from a quality standpoint, a safety, and environmental. And so the link to this back to the world of continual improvement that Matt and I decided to focus on is, does your ISO quality management system drive continual improvement or continuous improvement? And is there a nice strong link between the two? I've seen where sometimes they do, and they certainly can. I've seen other instances where the folks in continual improvement don't even know if the company is ISO registered or has a system. They're that big and maybe that disconnected that they're not working together. Obviously, from my point of view, I believe they should work together. And my personal belief is that the ISO system should be the foundation of, and probably more appropriately should be referred to as a business management system, not necessarily a quality management system, and then be the foundation for the business. And therefore, if the business needs process improvement or continual improvement, that it should be done within the boundary of the system itself, making the business better and then making it easier to sustain the gains. So when I did a little brainstorm on why is this topic important, again, for many years I worked in continual improvement, both with Lean and Six Sigma. Neither of these two disciplines, in my opinion, speak to how to define a system at their foundation. They reference it. They certainly speak of processes and process improvement, but I don't think either of them speak to defining your system and doing it well. Where I do think ISO 9000 does speak to defining your system, but before anyone jumps in, I already put in parentheses, although I'm going to beat you to it and say they don't do it well. They use ISO speak to say you must define the processes of your system and that you must define your system. But you got to read it many, many times to comfortably say that. But that's my reason for saying I think ISO should be a good foundation. As I mentioned, my experience in consulting in continual improvement was I worked with many teams that had trouble sustaining the gains. They did a great job of kicking up a lot of dust and in many cases confusing activity with progress. There was activity for sure. Not sure how much the needle moved, but yet they were confusing some of that. I believe that we should have a system in place, an ISO-based system that does a good job of measuring processes, so that, for example, we have a before picture, and then we can come in and drive continual improvement, and then get an after picture and have data to prove that we made a difference. And one of the other things that's my last bullet point on here is that we also have process owners that can be responsible for maintaining the gains that a continual improvement project puts in place. I used to joke with some of my classrooms when I was teaching black belts or teaching lean that in my head I envisioned my students with a binder of material of completed activity, walking up and down the halls of a company going, are you the owner? Are you the owner? You know, trying to hand off the completed project to an owner to sustain the gains, but oftentimes they struggle to find the owner, and in many cases by default, you know, whoever was involved in the team is by de facto responsible for maintaining the gains, and obviously that's not a good recipe for success. So to be brief in making this connection, I chose a few slides out of some training material that I had, and I just wanted to put something like this out there to say this is what I mean when I say a company should define their ISO system, something equivalent to this that basically answers the question, what are the primary processes that make up your company's unique system, your footprint, if you will, because many companies have equivalent to these processes. Some of them call them different things. Some of them, you know, split them into finer, smaller processes and have more of them. Some of them roll them up. Doesn't matter as long as an organization defines their system and what are their collection of processes that make up their system. Now, on something like this, and speaking to how can a system drive improvement, I work with companies to create a dashboard situation like this, where the red, green, and yellow indicate if these processes at the high level are achieving their intended results or achieving their metrics and goals. And if they're not, you know, they turn red. If they are, you know, they're green. If they're on the fence or need to be concerned about them, they turn yellow. And so to me, this is a bird's eye view of a system, a business that speaks to where there are potential pain points and where action may be needed to continually improve the business. Now, I'm a big fan, I know not universal, but I'm a big fan of turtle diagrams, and I've drawn the circle around the metrics box here that, as Matt mentioned earlier, we measure for efficiency and effectiveness. That if we have processes in the business that are being measured, I know ISO, for example, is only drives you to measure your key processes for effectiveness. I often suggest that both key and supporting processes be measured for both, so that we create a situation like on this slide, which is a little bit of an oversimplification. But if a process is not achieving its efficiency metrics, it might be a very good candidate for a lean project, where if it's not achieving its effectiveness metrics, it might be a good candidate for a Six Sigma type project. Obviously, this is a little bit more like a Venn diagram, where there's some overlap there, and it's not always clear which tool you reach for. But that's typically how I set up systems when working with organizations and using that ISO system to drive continual improvement. The last tool or point I like to make is the importance I put on process owners. That somewhere along the line, I came up with turning a defined process of a turtle diagram into a contract. that I tell my clients that if you're a process owner within that system, you should be able to read this contract aloud and mean it and internalize it. And that is, if you're the process owner, I fill in your name, agree to utilize these people from manpower and training that I have assured are competent and provided their training. And they will use this equipment, your upper left-hand box, machinery, material, hardware, and software, to turn inputs into outputs, strictly following methods and instructions. So put a lot of emphasis on making sure instructions are current, up to date, not too detailed, not too brief, but just right. And that as the process owner, they commit to achieving the metrics. You
Uh-oh.
use it.
Are we losing Ken? Oh man.
Most part
The voice a
taken
little
off
bit
the
kind of
table.
froze up.
Hey Ken, we were losing you there for a little bit.
Ooh, sorry about
You
that.
were
Can you
sounding
hear me
great.
now?
I can, and I want to jump in for a second there because and leave this slide up. Ken and I worked with a client on something like this, and they had a little trouble. And Ken, remind me if I'm getting this wrong, but they had a little trouble with that contract concept, which was telling, frankly. Not that I think this is a great way to think about processes. I think when a organization struggles with some of these things, it might mean that they also struggle with that responsibility and that ownership, which is going to tell you a whole lot in terms of your ability to actually change and improve their process. So I don't know. I just think that's interesting. I like this approach that Ken has. And Ken, were you able to hear that, or did we lose you?
No, I got you. Yeah, I heard that perfectly.
Yeah, and if you needed to shut off your video so you don't lose connection, don't worry about it.
Okay. No, and I think from a standpoint of introducing the topic, like I said, when you establish a system and clearly define the owners, define the metrics and all the contents of a turtle diagram, continual improvement efforts have a better foundation to work from. In fact, when I go back to this diagram, I remember in classrooms, I used to say, we take those processes, whatever one we're working on, and we almost unplug it from the system, put it on our workbench and do continual improvement to it, and then plug it back into the system was the visual I used to do. So that's why I feel strongly that a good quality system should be a foundation for continual improvement activities. And
so let's jump into that, and I want to pull in Dylan Nelson. You had a comment here, and just to remind everyone, the question that we were using was how does your quality system identify areas for process improvement, right? And it was a little leading because we wanted to know maybe almost how well does your quality system identify areas for process improvement, and that's where I want to kind of set the discussion is like, how well do you think you're doing that? And Dylan, I want to take your comment because you said, I have worked in settings before where we have utilized a QMS mostly for SOP storage, cadence training, corrective action, preventive action deviations, but haven't been exposed to something like this in health insurance. So I think that's kind of interesting for you, Ken. And then you were also interested in the turtle diagrams, which I think we could spend a little more time on. And maybe just a quick round of hands. How many people are already pretty familiar with turtle diagrams? If I could see some hands. No, looks like I'm not. So I think we can spend a little time on that too, Ken. Dylan, Dylan is on, right?
Yep, I'm on.
Okay. Did I capture that correctly? And there's anything you want to add before we let Ken chat?
Yeah, no, I think you captured it correctly, and I saw Jason put in the chat too that in his past experience, like QMS systems were strictly just for ISO compliance. And I think that was kind of my shared experience working in like I used to work in a manufacturing facility manufacturing blood products, and it was more so like we have to have this thing, it's required. We put our SOPs in it. It tells us when, if there's an updated SOP, we read it. It was more so like to me, it felt like more of a compliance insurance policy.
I was going to use that word, compliance.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the same experience that I had with this before. So.
And if I could just speak to that, I know exactly what you're talking about, and obviously being in the ISO world, I do come across that. The work I do, though, it's kind of interesting. I've been a little selective in terms of who I work with. I am absolutely not the guy if the company wants to just fly the flag and be compliant and pass an audit once a year. They're not looking for my help. I'm the kind of guy I believe in ISO systems, and I believe they can be very useful in driving improvement and helping you run the business. Now, I don't pass judgment. If you're in that world and you just want to fly the flag and it's a necessary evil, that's fine. But those
I don't know if I believe that, by the way, Ken. But go ahead. It sounds good for the discussion.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly not going to be a client of mine because I've been around this long enough that I'm still trying to eke out some job satisfaction at this age, and I don't get that from companies that are just looking to check the box. Yeah. So I get it, though.
Ken, can you tie this in though? So the turtle diagram is used as like a lot of people responded, hey, KPIs. That's how we find places to improve. Sure. But the turtle diagram does as well. And Edge has a question on it as well around how is it different from SIPOC? So could you go into the turtle diagram a little bit for us?
Absolutely. And so you're still seeing my screen. Let me go back to this. So here's my biased opinion on turtle diagrams. And that is somewhere along the line when I did a stint of teaching black belts for 8 years. Somewhere early on in that 8-year stint, I kicked SIPOCs to the curb and became a diehard turtle diagram guy. So if you look at what's on the screen for a turtle diagram, you can see the SIPOC going across the center where you got supplier, input. I don't typically fill out the center of operations, but outputs and customer kind of cut through the center of a turtle diagram. But I've become a big fan that, to me, I have told classrooms full of Six Sigma practitioners that, look, you shouldn't, if you don't have a metric, you don't have a process. If you're trying to improve a process and you're not measuring it, which a SIPOC, a pure SIPOC doesn't drive you to have, a SIPOC doesn't drive you to have an owner. It's implied, but it doesn't drive you. It doesn't have a space on there. It doesn't speak to the human resources or the capital resources, the instructions or lack of instructions. To me, it just gives you a better foundation to work from than the across the center of a SIPOC. So I obviously that's a biased opinion, but it's a bias from an old man that's not going to change his bias.
It's quite all right, Ken. No, I appreciate that. As somebody who's just recently joined Analog, it was introduced to me. I was like, how have I missed this in my tool belt for decades? And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a powerful tool.
And Dylan, anything you want to ask or add to that, or was that helpful for you too?
No, I think I had the same questions as Edge, and then I saw some of the comments as well, like, how is this really very different? But I mean, I think it's interesting that, again, I'm newer to this space than, some of the folks on the call, so I understand why I haven't heard about it yet. But I see the advantages that you were talking about, Ken, with, the metrics and reporting. The ownership is always such a huge pain in the butt, with getting people to be accountable to certain things, right? And then, like, eventually you're gonna understand, right, those machine materials, all those other pieces as maybe you go into your RCA or as you're mapping out a process. So No, I think this is a awesome tool and something I'm gonna definitely look into using. So thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Thanks,
Sure.
Dylan. I want to go to Jackie Popovich next. And Jackie, your comment was straightforward and very common amongst the replies that I've heard, which is we refer to metrics that aren't meeting threshold. Great. What I'd like to know is how well was that working in terms of identifying root cause, or maybe even were there any problems that you can share with that? And I'd be interested as Jackie responds, if anyone wants to add to her response. Go ahead, Jackie.
Yes, thanks, Matt. So I think for the company in which I was replying to, setting up metrics, like Ken was saying, you have to make sure that you have metrics in place in order to improve. And that was the first step that we needed to do. But then also those metrics need to be able, we had to put targets in place and threshold and define the thresholds. We had minimum, maximum values as well within those. It was very tough to understand how to put the right targets in place. I feel like the process owners was just like grasping for a number type of thing. I think that was a big problem. And then understanding, okay, what should be the min, what should be the max. And so we had to have those conversations, look at historical data in order to understand what the improvement should look like. I think that was a challenge, not only for me, but like for the company and for the process owners. I think that was the biggest thing, is trying to help them and guide them along with that. So, as far as putting metrics in place, reaching those targets, and then, because some of them, when we talk about SMART goals and stuff, they were very unreachable. And I felt like that kind of puts challenges and roadblocks in place.
Yeah.
And if I'd like to add is, and this was early in my career, I developed a dashboard for a new team. And like Jackie's saying, we struggled with what the right metrics were. And after about so we came up with it. I just forced the issue and we came up with it. But after about 3 months, everything was red. Everything was red. People were mad at me, and I went back and I revised them. I frankly made them easier to hit. And I never knew, and even still looking back, I'm not sure if that was the right thing to do, or if I should have pressed more on why did we think these were the right metrics in the first place? Or right thresholds in the first place. So I'd be interested, Ken, anything you have to share there, and then open it up to the group.
Absolutely. So first of all, let me say, in all my years of working with systems, coming up with the right metrics and that lower left-hand box of a turtle diagram for metrics is the hardest one by far. And what I always say is picking metrics that drive the right behavior is always a challenge and requires a lot more thought than people think right out of the gates. One thing that I see commonly and an explanation through it, I'll share with the group, is number one, picking the right metrics. For example, not too long ago, I was auditing a company that in the shipping department or shipping process, they were measuring on-time delivery. Okay. Wrong metric. Okay. To me, the rule of thumb or the way of thinking is we need to pick efficiency and effectiveness metrics that speak to how efficiently is this process turning its inputs into its outputs, and how effectively is it doing it. If the company is got horrible on-time delivery because of something in manufacturing that has nothing to do with the shipping department, they're mentally checked out if on-time delivery is not achieving its intended results. It needs to be something like, labeling errors or paperwork issues in shipping, or how quickly or efficiently do they turn, unwrapped or unpackaged product into packaged product? Are they doing their activities efficiently and effectively. A lot of times companies are picking big picture metrics and slapping them into a process basically to check the box and say, yeah, we're measuring something, but it's not driving the right behavior. And then using historical data to understand what you're capable of doing. And whether it's control charts or something like that is ideal. Not many companies are ready to do that, but I am a big fan of choosing realistic, challenging, but realistic goals. I do not like when I hear companies say, oh, we're using stretch goals or something like that, that to me, run the risk of taking a process that isn't, I look at like that as if you have a machine that's capable of running 100 parts an hour, and that's what it was designed to do, and you incent somebody to make it run 110 pieces an hour, you're going to distort the process or distort what it's capable of doing and potentially cause damage. Or maybe you achieve the metric in the short term, but the long term is lost. I'm a big fan of pushing processes, but within their capabilities, and then continuously raising the bar. But trying to get a process to do more than it's capable of doing at that point is reckless in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
One humble man's opinion.
Yeah, Yost, do you want? I'm pro stretch goal, so I almost want to come back and debate that one a little bit, Ken. But Yost,
okay.
you go next. You go next.
Maybe I'm on the same line, not so much on the stretch goal, but I actually was thinking about the metric on the on-time delivery. The on-time delivery is relevant for the customer. Yeah? So somewhere in the management system, it's relevant to have the on-time delivery KPI in the system. Maybe it's not at the level of the and that actually gets to my point, because what I have struggled with in my career is to somehow see, so at what level do I need to define the process and the process ownership, and maybe ownership gives you a hint at that, but somehow what is the right level of detail or staying high level for defining the process and then be able to accurately define the turtle elements?
My answer to that would be stick high level and maybe take a map like the one I've shown you here and simply try to pursue your equivalent to that at that level. Now, obviously, you can use a turtle diagram or any other process type template to drill further down into any one of those processes, but it's my belief that ISO is trying to get you to measure your business processes at that high level, and then as needed, drill down into the lower level activities of those big picture processes.
Yeah, I have some background in quality management myself as well, Ken. And I think where we never did a good job was actually to really nail the ownership aspect.
Yes.
Yeah, because this is not a junior position. This is actually pretty senior if you really want to implement as well, because this person needs to be able to take some decisions.
Yes.
Managing metrics, take a decision if you're going to invest in trainings or something, or change a process and things like that. So the level of the process is very relevant, and the ownership that comes with that is then also something that you need to think about in terms of the level of seniority of the person that takes that ownership.
Absolutely.
Edge, it looks like you wanted to get in here too.
Yeah, so just a couple things. First, I also agree, stretch goals. The reality is we want to hit perfection, right? So
I'm going to find my stretch goal coalition on this call here.
No, you're not going to have one. You're not going to have one. The other thing too that I think a lot of times we get into these habits of saying, oh, it's really hard to define metrics. I disagree with that. I think metrics are incredibly easy to define. And the reason, if we use either a turtle or a SIPOC, it's easy because you have the outputs. Like, what are the things that your group, your department does that goes either to another group or department or goes ultimately to the customer? And you just have to ask yourself, is it on time, in full, and error free? And the better aspect too is that because if they're internal customers, right, you just go and ask them, like, what matters to you? So you just do the VOC, and guess what? Metrics get built like that overnight. Now, mind you, you might not have the data, but you can build the metrics.
That's a great comment, and I use that with a lot of the clients I work with. If a process is struggling to come up with what to measure, I say ask your internal customer. They'll tell you what to measure.
Absolutely.
And that helps to get your business in alignment, so you're not doing what the boss thinks should be the metric. You're doing what your internal customer thinks, and that helps you. What I tell, in fact, I'm working with a company now on root cause analysis, and we talked about the best way to please your external customer is to please your internal customers along the way. Not wait till it gets to the back door and do.
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I've always taught, like, and I have to admit, I'm, because I'm new to Turtle, but I always teach, we're all a bunch of little SIPOCs connected together. So know who's your suppliers, go and talk to them, and go talk to your customers, and go visit them, go visit their boards, do all that stuff. It creates so much harmony. And I have to admit, some companies where I've worked, I've seen that. And yeah, it's like walking into, Willy Wonka's chocolate factory at that point. It's great.
Yep.
Jackie, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. I actually think that's great advice because, and Yost, you might know this too from our background. One of the things that we were always taught from our ISO auditor was, you measure the purpose of the process, right? But if you are getting the metric right from the voice of the customer, then your process will be more on point, right? So
Yeah.
you're obviously delivering what the customer is expecting rather than you building the process and thinking of that's what the customer wants and then measuring it and then being like, here, delivering it to the customer. And they're like, wait, that's not what we were asking for. You know what I mean? But if you ask them what the metric is, then you can build the process to ensure that it's delivering the correct output.
Yeah. I mean, think about how many products have failed just because they didn't take into consideration what customers wanted.
Right. It gets it right to the customer's, satisfaction. It brings that in. That's a great
point, Jackie.
That's a great way of thinking it.
I want to get to one last statement here, and it's Emily's, because I liked you talked about trying to use your system to identify patterns for defects versus gut feel. And I kind of want to hear a little bit more of that problem from your perspective, and then again have Ken and the rest of the group weigh in on that. Can you explain a little bit what you're seeing, Emily?
Yeah, so data for us is something that I wouldn't say is hard to find. It's hard for us to decipher which data is important. So we end up not a lot of the time. We just don't, which means that we're really talking, like when we talk about like identifying improvement opportunities, we're going by gut. We're going by what doesn't feel good in our process. Therefore, there's a problem there. There's something that has to change. And so obviously, the fact that we're going by gut, we don't understand, is that in fact a problem to begin with, or is that just how we feel about it? We don't have a way to measure, is it actually efficient or not? We don't have the data to back it up because we're going by gut feel and nothing but gut feel. So that's where we're at. And therefore we obviously can't then measure, did we improve something, because we're just measuring gut. We don't have anything to say, yeah, we actually made things better. We just feel better about it. It actually could be less efficient, but we apparently feel better about it. Anyway, so that's kind of where we're at.
Well, let me give you an example that I often share in class, real example from my world. And that was, I remember when a good friend of mine who was in charge of the sales process at the company I worked for reported in a management review, for example, that once again, we are green because he was measuring on-time quote performance, okay, which because of the product we manufactured, it was pretty much looking it up and getting it to the customer. It wasn't a complex formula. But one of my other good friends who owned the engineering process lost his mind at one point. They were friends too, but it was a good point in the meeting where he said, look, he says, I'm sick of you reporting out that you're green on, quote, on-time performance. He says, how about you start measuring your salespeople against the completeness at which they hand off their sales orders to my engineers. And the sales guy looked at him and he goes, okay, I'll do that. And it was a foundational change for our business because our sales guys were moving on to the next sale before they were getting updated blueprints and specs and all the necessary information. When we did start measuring that, the sales guys were a little peeved about it at first, but it improved our performance dramatically because we listened to the internal customer in that case. And boy, there wasn't a whole bunch of companies measuring that because it's not a sexy metric or something ChatGPT will tell you to measure, but it was what would make our business better. So it was. But it was a
commitment, Ken. It was a commitment to measuring what matters. And Emily, I'm afraid to say I hear a little bit of a cultural issue there to say, hey, we're really committed to measure what matters. Because I agree with Edge that, there's a lot of things that you can measure, right? It just takes a bit of time and effort and say that's important enough. And it is important enough if you really want to understand root cause and get to the solution. So I guess I see you nodding, Ken or anybody, how do you address the cultural side of that? Can you give Emily any help on how she addresses the cultural piece of getting good measurement?
And I was going to wait and see if anyone else wanted to talk.
Floor's open.
I will say, I'll start with something really, it also depends, some of it depends on the company. Like I've worked at companies where there are a lot of engineers. I'm working at one that, I'm permanent here. It's all engineers. So guess what? Data is everything. That's what they live in. I've worked at other places where, the art department was one of the biggest groups. So things were sort of mushy. There was a lot of, hey, this feels good. This feels right. It was really hard for them even to do that kind of stuff. But, we got there. We talked about tick sheets and counting and stuff. Sometimes it's the ability to get data that creates the bad behavior.
Yep.
You have to understand how much they are on that curve, if you will.
Marsha, you've got your hand up.
Hi there. I think for me, it kind of comes back to the process ownership that you were mentioning before. A lot of the teams I work with, they struggle to see their work as a process.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of what we're talking about here makes sense if you see, my department runs this process from start to finish.
Great point.
And, but I think that ownership piece and making sure people understand what process do they actually live in, because a lot of people are like, I just come in and I just do all sorts of things all over the place, whatever's needed. And just visualizing their work as a process and having an owner defined is, I think, a huge step in the right direction.
Emily, I want to ask, do you see that problem? Does your company recognize their work as processes or as a bundle of processes, or is that foreign to a lot of folks?
I think that's foreign for most. I'd say like our operations team is good about that, but anything outside of that, no, definitely not. Which means it's hard to value stream that too, right? How do you fit into the whole stream of things? So.
Well, and over the years of working with many, many companies, I've developed an observation that most of the companies that I work with fall into this, where when I start working with them, what I often see is a good, hardworking group of dedicated employees that would walk on hot coals to get the job done, working in the absence of a system. Okay, that they're just get her done, answer the emails, voicemails, texts, fight the next fire and try to move the ball farther down the field. But they're not doing it as an executed system. They're doing it as a collection of people playing get her done. And that's frustrating to watch. But good system, I've seen it firsthand and worked. I've had the fortunate experience to work with a lot of companies to get them beyond that when they're like, wait a minute, we should have been doing this years ago. And that's a fun point to get to it with a company. And I've had the pleasure of doing it.
Yeah. We're still very much in firefighting mode.
Okay. I was there at one point and I'm glad to be out of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Yost and then Jackie, last comments, and then we'll close.
Okay, mine is short. Actually, because KPIs, that's sometimes is somehow is frightening for people, complex, difficult. While in reality, it also can be very simple. So we always talk about measurements. Yeah, sometimes it's actually only monitoring. Actually, Ken, you were talking about ISO 9001. It does speak, I think, about measurement and monitoring. And monitoring means did you complete this or that action? Yes or no? Yeah, and that sometimes is already a KPI that is relevant for a delivery to your next process. Yeah, so it can be also simpler than maybe people sometimes think when you speak about KPIs. That's my only observation. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll be real quick too. I was thinking from like a culture aspect, it has to be meaningful, which I think is, the ownership is definitely a big key. Meaningful so that it matters to those that are doing the process. And then I also think visibility is another key thing. If it's something that you're just talking about, even just once a month, it's not on the top of everybody's mind. But if you have it up and showing like, hey, this is where we're at today, that way, or like even, 15-minute stand-ups and being like, hey, this is where we're at today, any challenges, roadblocks. And then that way it just stays on the top of their minds.
Yep, I agree. Absolutely. The visual piece
really
is
well
top
said.
of mind. Ken, any last comments?
No, other than thanks for an enjoyable lunch. I love discussions like this.
All right. Well, we'll keep them going. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending April, and we will be back in May, and I hope to see you there.
All right.
Thanks. Bye,
Good
everyone.
meeting you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.